Think Outside the Lines is a space for anyone ready to stop checking boxes, to step off autopilot, and create the life you actually want, with clarity, intention, and alignment. Whether you're questioning the default path, rebuilding from scratch, or just looking to feel a little more like yourself. My guest today traded a mind-led life for a body-based knowing. Without a map, she found her way to a path she could only see clearly by looking back. Join me as we think outside the lines with Cheryl Whitelaw. Welcome. I do want to start with something that you had said in our back and forth prior to our conversation that it's stuck with me ever since I read it, and I feel like it's probably something a lot of people can relate to. You said, I strongly believe that I need to have a clear plan to be successful. Again, relate to that so much. Tell me how that sentiment has evolved in your life and just talk a little bit about your journey that's led you to this moment.
Yeah. Thanks for seizing on that because it's a way into how everything's changed, right? Grew up a pretty bright kid. You're supposed to go to school. So I went to university. And so I lived in the mind totally. It's not that I wasn't active and doing things, but it was as if my mind and my body were in separate planets. And so my way to be with the world was to make a clear plan, right? Get good at the planning, get it out front. And I didn't know this at the time at all. This is, I would say, realization maybe in the last 5 years that fundamentally meant I was living at least 5 seconds ahead of myself or more all the time. And that my little engine of being with reality was trying to make what I thought should happen in the plan be what was happening now. It's exhausting to live that way, to really be focused, and then having the range of reaction when I failed to execute that. And in some respects, it's a great way to go through, like, to achieving things. So it helped me map out what my path in a way that was really helpful in a very liberal arts university setting, that it was like, take what you want. It's liberal education, which was wonderful. And easy to get lost or floundering. So I had this way of just getting through it. I didn't know there was another way to be. It was the only option. And then I found when I had various touches with some different martial arts. And the funny thing is, like, when someone's punching you, you need to be right here, right now. Plans don't last very long in martial arts training because something else happens, right? And so it really was the work of years training with a teacher who had the wisdom to say, no, here, you got to be here in order to be with it. And now the differences start, and there's a whole other way, I think, of engaging. But it really was the process of decades, I would say, to really discover the limits of this planning self. I meet people now who I could have been like, they're doing the same thing. And it's a way to be with reality. It's a way to try and control reality, but it's not really living with what's happening right now. And so that, like, finding and filling that gap has been a huge part of my living forward.
Yeah. I want to back up just a little bit. Take me through, like, the beginnings of this journey, right? You're sitting at a desk doing work that you believed in, but you said something in your body just kind of knew. It wasn't really a thought. It was just like a feeling, right? A knowing that you couldn't keep living the way that you had been.
Yeah.
And what I'm fascinated most about your journey is that you didn't really have a clear next step. You just had a feeling. How do you even begin to trust something like that when your mind can't really reconcile?
Yeah. It helps if it's a really big feeling.
Yes.
So like that. Yeah. I've had people that say, like, how did you know, if I'm sort of expressing a more intuitive knowing? And it's like, if you felt what I felt, you would know too, right? Like there's something really big. But yeah, I was working in many ways what could be described as a dream job. I was in a 2-year college in a sort of innovation center. We were doing intercultural education. And so it was this cool goals, like, we're going to increase the intercultural competence of every Canadian in Canada, big dreams, and an opportunity to really do that work. And when looking back, like, we really got to some milestones and resources and things. Like, it was really wonderful. And one day, I'm sitting in my windowless office And I looked at the screen, I was like, it was almost like a sand timer. It's like I have only so many days left of me being able to actually sit in front of a computer all day. Like that was the knowing. And it was kind of like, I'm only like 37. What? What's like, I've got a ways to go. What I didn't know. But it was coinciding with, and I would say this is where the diverse things you do, when they start to really come to your center and integrate, that's also a way to move on that feeling. So I had started this martial art, Aikido. I loved it. Like literally, I wasn't particularly good at it because I started it a bit later in life. And I had so much joy. I would clap my hands with joy like a small child. Unfortunately, that was also the signal to stop the class that the teacher used. So I stopped the class many times in my first year.
Accidentally, I love it. I love it.
But it was the beginning. And again, I had no insight at this at the time, but the beginning of this other kind of intelligence. And I would call it somatic intelligence, meaning my whole person. So there's a role for mind, there's a role for heart, there's a role for gut. And I would say cumulatively, there's a something more. And that something more was like, you got to go now. Like there has to be a change. So not how I had planned, but the plans had utterly fallen apart. Like the way I had sketched out the next 10 years, every single aspect of that collapsed. Also makes it easier to do something besides the plan when the plan really just fails utterly. So it was a way to go, I have to go follow that feeling, and took me deeper into Aikido, took me to Columbus, Ohio in the Center for Movement Studies with Dr. Paul Linden. And he had done a thing that was 40 years of study of Aikido. And he had also taken something called Feldenkrais as a training. And he brought those together. And I didn't even know really what he was doing, but I looked at it and I was like, I want that thing, even though I could hardly explain it to somebody else.
What do you feel like it was about these particular studies that resonated so deeply with you that you just felt this need to continue on this trajectory?
Yeah, I think I had teasers in my graduate degree. I did a thesis on the teachable moment. And so it's like that aha moment when you not just learn something, but you realize something that means you can't ever go back and unrealize it. So learning that's transformative in some sort of way. And I had a taste of that. I had trained karate in my 20s. And my teacher then, he could just watch you. And it was the softest thing, but then he would just change something for you. And you understood it on a whole other level. And that was just normal. That was just Sensei Kenjo doing Sensei Kenjo thing. But it was kind of like, how does he know how to do that? And it was true every time. So I ended up including him in my master's thesis. So I developed for myself, there's this thing I'm starting to get my hands around that's pretty interesting. But looking back, it only makes sense that I found somehow or got pushed towards, here's another person who can articulate it better, who's conscious about it and actually could enable change. And I'm not a particularly woo person, but because I worked in academia, I love a good theory, love its limits.
Take some of the woo-woo away.
Yeah. But I had an asthma attack once in the training with him. And he was kind of like, may I? And he touched my knee and it was totally gone. I've never had inhalers lift the symptoms. And then he made some sort of joke like, I have to touch people because if I don't, they burn witches in Ohio. And it was just like, I fully experienced it, but I didn't understand it. And so it really, I think it motivated me to go, there's a lot I don't know about what's happening here. And I'd better go find out. In a lot of ways, it was world changes that made me pay attention to this. We had done really hard work for 6 or 7 years to come up with an approach to train people how to talk across differences, really looking in the workplace, and really without, at the time we started the work, the kind of anti-racism, anti-discrimination kind of language was dominant. And we really were seeking a way to go in that wasn't about, I'm going to should you to death so that you do the right thing. It was more like, oh, I'm noticing something. Could we open a dialogue about this?
Yeah.
So it felt really important. And I worked at the time in a 2-year college that literally, I'm located in a kind of prairie province and in a city that's often referred to as like Texas North. It's a bit of a red belt. And Trump was elected into office. Literally, he came into office a month after I finished this training.
And this was the first Trump?
Yeah, the first Trump. And I came back to this college where we had 120 countries of origin, like, and indigenous, and like lots of diversity. And all of a sudden, people were having fistfights in the hallway. That the tension around that much diversity just bubbled over. And I was working, connected to this community I just studied with, and I said, help me intervene, because if I come around the corner and I see this, I'm going to step in. I don't want to get killed, right? Like, help me be skillful about it, because I knew that all the training work we'd done on this good communication, as soon as you're in a conflict situation, it's not accessible when you're negotiating fight, flight, freeze, or the other option. And it really kicked me in the butt to say, like, all you've done is really helpful, but it's partial. And there's another level that you need to work with. One of the things that Paul taught was literally what we feel as emotions are a body event. And we can flip a calm switch in our body that will influence how we feel, how we think, and what's happening in the body, so we can engage with people in conflict in a peaceful way, rather than when that fight, everything narrows, there's black and white option. Like, we just don't have our full resources available for us. So it was, the time shifted. It was like, oh, I think I need this skill set now. You figure back.
Yeah.
And it was developing in Aikido slowly. You can train Aikido your whole life and not develop these capacities explicitly. Again, I'm really fortunate. I have a teacher that holds a really big net for how he understands the practice. But it really just set me on this path to say the body, in fact, has a dominant role in how we behave. I remember hearing Wendy Palmer, who is also an Aikidoist and did a lot of sort of corporate engagement work, say that by the time we realize we're fearful, the body's been doing fear for at least a minute. And
interesting.
Yeah. And so that if you don't manage that as a physiological event, you're fighting your own body, right? You can say, it's when people go, I'm fine. Right? They say something through their mouth, and cognitively they might believe it, but their body is clearly not fine. It's having this surge of hormones and emotions. And so to get real about dealing with that as a way to support a calm that you can retrieve, if you leave it as a way to stay connected with someone and have these emotions, rather than everything's a timeout and then I'll recollect myself. The nature of what I was facing at this very diverse college, unlikely to have time for a timeout if there's people tearing into each other.
Yeah. I'm really actually fascinated by what you just said about like the fear having been present longer than you've probably been able to have awareness around that. I'm actually thinking back to the moment you said that. I flashed back to an incident yesterday where it was a kind of a heated argument that I was having with someone. And by the time I could feel it in my body, it was too late. To your point, it was almost like too far gone. And then I had to step away and take some deep breaths and do that whole thing. And so I'm really fascinated by like, how does this, not to divert too much, because I like the trajectory of where we're going, but to just take a step and pause, like how does this work in practice? How do you become aware maybe in the moment sooner than too late?
Yeah. And then if you'd asked me even 5 years ago, I would have been less clear. I've been doing work that's in a deeper level, coming from Chinese internal martial arts as well as Aikido, which is a Japanese art. And so there's this idea of the word is ting, but it's really listening inside. The Western scientific word is interoception. So, when you notice your stomach grumbling, that's an interoceptive sensation, right? It's not about someone in your skin or a stimulus coming from the outside. This is one of these places we don't know what we don't know. So that can be cultivated so that you can start to perceive the processes when your body's shifting. In certain, I think, extensions, it is about being able to influence or exert some control over processes that are normally very automated in the body. They are run by more ancient limbic brain system. So we don't tend to have conscious control, things like digestion and temperature settings, regulation of the body, like those sorts of things. So that process, that listening in over time, and I'm let's say 6 years on the pathway of this. So I think it's
a lifelong journey.
Yeah, there's a lot more to go. You can start to detect small things that cue you sooner about that. I use that inner listening to help people with balance management. So if you can detect the first moment of losing balance, you are much more robust to regain it. If you notice it at the last possible moment and then it's gone, that's not that helpful.
Too late. Yeah.
So the same applies to the stress response, is like the sooner you can perceive it or even have a knowledge of yourself. I had an incident yesterday. I just finished serving on a board in the community, and there's a character on the board who's been there forever, has a certain stress style, which is usually to yell at you as soon as she sees you. And I was managing a whole annual general meeting. There's many things to do. And so she showed up the door, yell in process. And I said, I don't want to hear from you right now. I have a meeting to run.
That's one way.
Yeah. I know all about the door because there's an issue with new doors and whatever. And it was enough entry. I didn't really yell back, but it was a firm, no, because I know the impact of what you have on me, and we're not doing that. And she didn't do it. She just shut her mouth. She walked away. And then afterwards, just acknowledged that I was in stress and that her stress style is to say it. But you say it on people all the time. And it was...
And you don't have to include other people in this every time.
And it's like, I knew for the resources of what I needed to do, I didn't have any left for her. So it was a preemptive, I'm just going to ground that down. But without, she might call it aggression, but it was like a solid, I'm in and we're done. And then I moved on. I didn't think about it. I just went to the next little crisis and the next little thing, and it was fine. So it's a really helpful, practical life skill to notice this and then be able to make a choice in that space. Yeah.
So I love in this example, I'm interested in more examples, because in your particular example, you actually had some foresight, as it were, right? Because you knew this person, you'd interacted with them before. And so you had an understanding of how to handle them, right? Based on your own needs. Is there any tips or tricks, or, because you mentioned that you start to feel it. What do you do when you start to feel it? Because you probably have that moment in your brain before you go into the fight or flight, right? Or before that other system kicks in. Are there things that you can do before that happens that help you take control back?
Yeah, or even when it does happen. And this is, again, not my invention. It's coming out of the core of the Eastern arts. I call it centering and grounding. And the grounding, I would say if you had to pick one, I would pick grounding first. One of the things that happens when we start to go into a fight or flight, we go up, like things tighten up. It literally constricts blood flow to the brain. So a grounding movement, which really is the process of sending your intention and your attention into your feet in the ground so that connection to the ground gets stronger, not weaker. And there's various sort of, I would say, little techniques to make that happen. Like I'm borrowing a lot from Tai Chi and Qigong, but this idea that you're going to settle yourself downward. The best image I have, because it's a feeling, and is this idea that if you've ever picked up a sack of sand, like a sandbag, compared to a round, hard medicine ball or exercise ball, the sand wants to go down. Like you hold the top of the thing and it slips out the bottom, or you hold the bottom and it flips over. There's this descending down that we can pair with an exhale, right? So if we did it right now, inhale, and then just sending your intention and your breath out and down to start to build that relationship so your tissues literally move towards the ground. At an extended sort of version of this, I can do this sort of in my Aikido practice, and I get really difficult to pick up, like really difficult.
Interesting.
Like people might physically be able to lift me off the ground, but my structural integrity stays intact. A 6-year-old child can do this, right? It's just applying the process and really being grounded. The second one I would say is centering. Again, we tend to, if you ask somebody, where are you, like in your body, they'll usually point somewhere around the head or somewhere around the heart. If you can locate yourself just below your belly button, so in the bowl of your pelvis, first of all, it's your actual center of your body, right between your toes. Yeah. There's processes, again, it helps your breathing be deeper when we ramp up, right? There's a thing. And so I tend to support people, like when I do this in a training session, to learn to breathe in. And as they breathe out, they're dropping the front core. So their tongue, their jaw, their chest, their belly, so that all of those tissues that are next to surround the vagus nerve, surround that sort of fight or flight, physiology, so that they all settle in that kind of rest and digest sort of mode. In a martial art contest, you don't want to be relaxed. You just want to be settled and alert. And so for some people, this is building a new category of being because they relax and collapse, right? This is me on the Barca Lounger, just like totally flesh.
Yeah. I'm thinking that it's like a new way to relax, right?
Yes.
That like we're not trained in. And I'm fascinated listening to you describe it because I was like, I've never thought to relax this way before in my entire life.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the sort of thing, like I'm a bit of a skeptic just naturally, so I've had to road test this under all sorts of conditions. Yeah. I'm a black belt now in Aikido, and I tend to, all the guys I'm training with at that level, they're huge guys. They're much stronger than me in that physical sense. So it's easy to get adrenalized and ramped up because if I don't do my part well, I'm just going to get hurt. And so to just put that on and sink and settle, and then you're on for the next round. It's taken work, but it's work anybody can do. It's not a special skill. It's just that you talked about before, it's things we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big believer in you don't know what you don't know. It sounds to me like it's really just a new way of experiencing your body, of being present in your body that I think that's one of the few things that we don't really do much work on. If you go to the gym or you work out regularly, that's still just, it's more of the same way that you're used to being in your body. This sounds like almost like a completely different approach, which is really fascinating.
Yeah. Language is so important because it can help or it can hide, right?
Yeah.
We tend to be conceptual. And one of the things I did learn from Paul Linden, he required language to be an embodied thing. And so it was painful, the training. He would just push people until they got out of concept mind and into a word that actually expressed something of the body. And he was diligent on that for a reason. We do think about our body as an it that is me. And if it's not you, like who else is it? Your body is absolutely you. And so it's this core relationship with not, oh, my wrist hurts. I hurt, right? Like
But what is you? What is I? Like, if you want to take it to that level, I feel like I listen to a lot of Sam Harris meditations, and that's one of the things that he talks about a lot, right? It's the idea of like like a lot of his meditations are centered around like figuring out what that is. What is the I? What is the you? What's the observer, right?
Yeah.
And I think that as you think about presence and being in your body, it can just feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And especially we're in environments, especially now, like the screen environment, whether it's the phone or the computer, TV or whatever, all of them are designed to have our attention utterly separate from our body. It's the thing I can say is when you get used to actually living at home in your body,
Yeah.
the relationship changes, and I'm discovering will for the rest of my life. There's new possibilities in that again, we just don't think of that as being important. But it's literally, for me, one thing it's about, it's just more information. So when you're present in your body, like I had a really interesting non-event happen. I happened to be up early, so I'm reading by the picture window in my living room. And I know the neighbors, there's a dog walking around, as typical people. And then this guy walks by and he looks at the house and he sees me and he stops at the walk. And if I had been reading and missed that moment, I think the outcome would have been different. But I saw him stop and make a decision and I went, oh no, because I knew it was a bad decision for me. And so he came up to the door, and I don't know why I felt compelled to open the door. I could have just not answered, right? But I had a screen door and an inside door. And so I opened the inside door and had a handle on the screen door and spoke to him. And he started to lie to me. And I just knew they were lies. My car's broken down. I need jumper cables. Could I just get in your house?
Oh, no, none of those.
And I was completely on. I was relaxed and I wasn't adrenalized, which I tracked afterwards. And then he finally said something like, I saw you and decided to come here. And it was like, that's the only true thing I heard. And I was like, no, I can't help you. And I shut the door and he went back and walked down the street. And then afterwards I processed, because all of that was running on instinct. Then I had understood something about him. There was no, like you say, what made you, I have no idea what made me, but it was like I saw his choice and I knew what the choice meant for me. And
trusting what you felt in your body, right? I think that's such a big part of the story.
Yeah. And it could be small, if you analyze it, it could be small movements. It could be just an expression he had, or like those micro details. But the information package I got was, this is bad news and you're not going to let him in. And so it was interesting. When I showed up at the door, there's a way of being present in the martial arts field. We call it Urmi, or entering. I was out there so far that he literally recoiled and half turned away from me, because I was streaming this whatever, right, out, this presence. It was a palpable thing in our interaction. So it's, when I listen to people who philosophize, especially in the martial arts worlds, about what that is, I don't really know. Like, this is to be honest, but he reacted as if that force of presence was something real. And so it's okay.
I'm thinking about this as it pertains to conflict resolution, right? And one of the things, like I'm going back to where you were in that situation where you were still at your last job. There's that incident in the hallway, right? And I don't like this, but do you feel like maybe there's a way now, in hindsight, that you could go back and be in that situation differently and feel different in that environment? Or I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. Like when I think about the capacities I believe I've grown now to take back, to have entered into the situation calmly, have had a kind of palpable presence that people know that when someone's really angry, if you hear someone yelling on the street, it's a contagious feeling, right? It impacts you. That calm, when well grounded, when well centered, can also impact you.
Yeah.
And so that disarming, in a way, just because you're present, you're grounded, you're able to enter a situation. The other thing I would say is on just a physical self-defense or management of force, yeah, I've got a solid 6 to 7 more years in me. I've got some game. It's not that I feel like, I could go into any situation, but I think if someone took a swing at me, I have a response in terms of self-protection or counter moves. So there's a confidence also that you can walk in and be calm because you have something behind you.
Yeah. And I think too about, again, like just this general topic of conflict resolution. And we talked a little bit about like just the state of the world today, right? We're so divided. It's so polarized. I'm constantly searching for ways to, like, how do we reconcile this? How can we just be better as humans? And I think that those of us that have the awareness have the obligation to help drive that forward. I don't have the answer, but I hear about things like you're talking about, and I'm like, maybe there's something in there where the answer could lie. I don't know.
I desire that deeply too. It's part of why I'm opening my Kind Power studio. But, the world is different from this grounded, calm, present place.
But does it have to be? I don't, right? That's
what I would say is from there, you can be human. You can remain human, even as you attack me, and again, I've had some experience with that. I was a diversity inclusion officer for an online embodiment conference a few years ago. The conference happened about 3 months after the George Floyd incident. So that space was red hot. And I'm a white person with a name of Whitelaw, so just triggered.
Yeah.
And we dealt with, and there was like 400,000 people registered around the globe for this conference. Like it was a scale that was unreal. And so there were numerous conversations that I had no idea how to deal with things. I had no background. And so I just, with the small team that we worked with, I said, whatever we do, let's commit to remaining human, to treating the person or people in front of us as human. And we may not resolve the difference or the disagreement. There's no, if we're going to be embodied about this embodied peacemaking, that's our North Star. Okay, let's go. And I got to road test that. The hardest was I had a meeting with 16 African-American women activists, all from the States, who deeply wanted to see a change in how the conference was operating. And so I met with them. And it was a really hot hour, 2 hours, I think, for the meeting, because they were prepared to go to battle. And the one thing I asked, I said, before we start, could I hear from everybody to know who you are? And I think my Canadianness a little bit. I said, if I don't understand your context, how can we communicate? So that introduction took an hour. They had a lot to say. But then we were all human together. And again, in retrospect, that was a move that wasn't so much to save my neck, but just to let's be human in this space. And then we can actually hear each other.
So there's so much there that you just touched upon that I know that I related to. I'm sure a lot of people listening relate to it. So during that time, I was leading a very diverse team at a large corporation, and there was so much advice coming from upper levels of leadership that was like, keep the conversations at a minimum. Let's just have people focus. And I really had such an aversion to that sentiment because I was like, no, I don't care if that's the directive. I'm not going to do that with my team. I'm going to your point, I really just want to listen. And when I think about diversity, equity, inclusion, the backlash that we've seen to that, which is just astounding to me, because really all it is listening. Really all it is being present for people to tell their story. And you don't have to relate to it. If you can take something from it, amazing for you. But that wasn't the directive. The directive was really to just say, hey, we are all in this together. We all are here to peacefully coexist.
Yeah.
And let's find a way to navigate that. And part of that is through allowing people to tell their story and to listen to that and hear them and hold that space for them. So I'm in great admiration for anyone, especially around that time, especially white people. Like, we say that as if there has to be some sort of apology attached to it. I felt that, but I also tried to look at it from the perspective of this is a great opportunity for me. And I just wish that we could still be in that conversation in a meaningful way. It feels like there's been such a retreat from that, and it's so disenchanting to me. That's where we are.
Yeah. And it's in my evolution of that, like I'm thinking back to in this community group, there's a changing in the generational makeup of the volunteers. And there's a considerable amount of anger, I think, amongst the elders that the world has changed, right? And so
But they got all the spoils too. So it's confusing to me.
And they had decided something I had done was a deep offense to them. And so I hit a board and got half an hour of their rage. And it was, sometimes you get thrown in the fire and then you go, oh, I'm not getting burned. Okay. But I didn't do anything in particular, but I was grounded and centered. They had things they needed to say. And I think this is the kind of Marshall Goldberg conflict resolution. Just once they had talked enough that they actually could hear something, I just went back to so this action was related to this. Our chair of this committee asked for this input. And so I made a suggestion based on my experience of this. That's all. That's all that was about. I had no thought about that. When danced with several people that sort of weaponize you hurt me, even if that wasn't your intention and you're liable for it. And I understand very fully where that comes from, but it doesn't allow for radically different perspective and perception to happen. It reduces us that we're all in the same bandwidth, but you did something that hurt me. And it's rarely is it that simple in education. Totally. And there has to be a mutuality to talk through. So yes, there's a self-responsiveness of, this was my intention. This is how I acted. And at this point, this seems to be where the perception of that became that. And I view that more as perceptual hygiene, right? Let's go through and is there something to clean up? Sure. Like I've done lots of engagements enough that certain language just inflames people, right? So it doesn't matter what you meant by the word is the conveyor. And so, the mistake was probably shouldn't use that word because it wasn't the best carrier of my intention. And it had that impact. Absolutely. But
it's also like listening happens in both directions, right? I think that's something that we sometimes forget where it's I don't just have to listen to you. We get to listen to each other, and that's how the conversation works, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I said earlier that operating from this more embodied calm and grounding feels like a different world because what I notice when I'm in some of those hotter interactions, my need to defend myself goes away. There's nothing to defend. It goes back to where we started. This is happening right now, and I don't have to like it. Like I did my year of community service on this board, and I just stepped off yesterday, and I'm ready to move on to some other things, right? But just to accept, okay, this is happening, and so there is an allowance for the reality, which is not like. People say, but if I do that, then I'm agreeing with it. I don't mean that at all. It's just that, that happened. This is happening right now. And I could be there. From that calm, then you make choices. I could choose to escalate it. That would be a response pattern, totally by wheelhouse. I could choose to flee from it. I could choose to engage in certain ways. I can make choices about, I'm going to focus on this or I'm going to focus on that. People want to know that it turns out well with a nice red bow. I can't promise that because some differences are not reconcilable, right? But what the conference experience told me when I heard this back through like the multiple people who worked and the feedback they got from lots of people, that they said that they actually felt at all times, even when they were frustrated as hell that we didn't just do what they said, that they felt they were treated like as a decent human being. And so I thought... And
that they were heard. Probably. That's kind of circling back to what we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it holds out and it's part of the work I'm about to start to really say, I think this can be trained, can be developed. It's not an esoteric thing that you need 10 years of martial arts before you can even tap it, but to say these are things ideally that we should learn when we're young so that we're resourced to be in the conversations that we clearly need to be in to move forward.
That's so profound, right? Because I wish we had more thoughtfulness around that idea that these are skills, these are life skills that people could use much earlier in their lives that would just prepare the world for all these adults, right, that grow up. And we need more advocates, I think, in that space, advocating for that kind of stuff, because to your point about the screen time, and it's not getting better. I feel like it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah. And I'm concerned about what I read about for anxiety levels for young people, and the sort of claim or wish that I have to feel 100% safe before I can even show up. And if we're in a therapy conversation, I agree with that, because there's a very tender and specific work that's happening. And so we need a high level of safety and trust. A lot of the work I do with my clients, the same. And we can't actually live a life, especially I think if you're 15 or 17 or even 21 and have no challenge, you won't successfully get to adulthood, to have a self.
You won't be able to navigate.
No, not at all. And so I watch the generation of folks that I know, which isn't large, but to see like the utter reticency to actually step into something that's difficult, and talk with my partner about it. His children are in that university, getting first jobs thing, and watching. They just don't want a single uncomfortable thing in the journey. And it's a job interview for the first time is really nerve-wracking. Like,
every time. It doesn't actually matter how many job interviews you go to. They will always be nerve-wracking.
Yeah, and these sort of calming practices help a ton. Even last night, doing this big annual general meeting, like, yeah, of course I'm nervous, right? The situation is fear-worthy because you don't know what community is going to do or say. Will they show up? There was a whole layers of... We need ways to be with that, because that's about being alive, right? Like,
I could have you back for an entire conversation on that topic alone. I think there's so much there that's worthy of speaking to. You have described your journey as a golden seam in the bedrock. I think that was a quote that you used, and really just something that you could only see looking back. So what do you think you would have done differently if you'd been able to see it earlier? And I guess maybe the most important question there is, to what extent does that even matter?
Yeah, the journey, I entered into things that I was supposed to do that were readily at hand. Went to university, did a degree that didn't really seem to do it, did a second degree, did all the steps, got a job, got married, tick. And I was definitely searching for something, and I didn't know what. So if I had met someone earlier, like in a way I did, I started karate in my 20s, but if I'd really come into the kind of somatic world that I'm working in now, like whether it's the Aikido or the Feldenkrais, think of how different it would be to have 30 years of development in that vein, rather than, okay, mid-40s, we're going to really finally do it. And so where it matters for me is I'm just more motivated to work with younger people, because I have the benefit. I volunteered our kids' Aikido class. We've got some kids that started at 4 years old, and they are mighty. They're not they're lovely. They laugh, they play before class, but they just know this thing in their body already. Now they're 6, now they're 8. And I just think hopefully they stick with it, but it's still viewed as a hobby and not this core developing kind of process.
Yeah, I asked that question because I think a lot of people live in kind of this gray area between believing that perspective is important, yet simultaneously knowing that really the only thing we can do is move forward. Say more about that.
I'm really influenced. I had training in 2011, 2012 through Integral Coaching Canada. Integral theory by Ken Wilber is a theory of, I would say, human maturation and complexity. And so what I can't help but look at that, like, my perspective is just as authentic as your perspective, and we don't agree. And that's a artifact of a certain stage of consciousness in the maps that I follow. And one of the big Achilles heel of that stage is people are pretty sure they're at the pinnacle of self-development when they're making those statements. So it is a bit of a tough nut to crack. It is where the diversity inclusion values live. They're beautiful values. Like, to have a world where we actually genuinely can exist authentically as ourselves and get along with those differences. And so the solution, according to integral theory, doesn't lie at that stage. It lies at the next stage, which is a substantive shift in consciousness to really understand sort of the interconnectedness of everything. So the difficulty, like that, I think it's a really genuine, we know we have to move forward, right? That inner drive is, this isn't the end. We can't end it here.
Yeah.
Is absolutely true. And to do that kind of conscious development work takes work, right? Like, when I first started it, I was deeply frustrated at all what I called the navel gazing, and have had an appreciation over the couple of decades since then about the necessity of continuing to develop that perspective. A small differentiation I found really helpful is the difference between authentic and the difference between true, meaning someone else gets that result too. And you could tag that as subjective and objective. I find that's a very cognitive distancing language. And when I work with my clients, everything they tell me is 100% authentic. I 100% embrace that, but I know not all of it's true. And the reason why I say that is our personal conditioning creates the story, the explanation around an experience that becomes real, right? Like, we form ourselves from these stories. I can't do that anymore because I injured my knee and now I can't do this. And so they build this story, and that is authentic. Part of my job is it's a yes and. So everything they have experienced, they are the experts on themselves. They've lived it. So it's authentic. And then we do gentle discovery work on, so is that true in all instances? If someone tells me they have pain, do you have pain all day? Is it when you get up? Is it worse after you've sat? Help me understand your pain. And so it's a discovery conversation, because most people have gelled it into their personal story and they stop noticing what it is, what's actually in front of them, what's actually happening. And I do feel like some of that dynamic allows us some spaciousness to discover something more, rather than just compete with our authentic stories.
Yeah, that's beautiful. There's a lot there. I can't believe we've been talking for an hour already. The hour has flown by. But as we wrap, I want to revisit the quote that we started with. You said you used to strongly believe that you needed a clear path to be successful. What does success look like for you today? And what would you say to someone listening who might be looking to redefine their definition?
Yeah, like, that's a great question. Welcome to my muddy space.
I love it.
So the thing that I'm deconditioning and reconditioning right now is, I had a certain way with that plan, work in the plan. There's a discipline, there's an ambition, and a work ethic, right, that goes with that. Just having had the Olympics come through, you see all those athletes, right? They know how to work, right?
Yeah.
And work to work at a level most people can't even conceive of. So the very weird thing that's happening to me right now is I'm set to open my studio and really launch my life's work. I don't want to work anymore. And so it took about a year for me to really accept, so that's true. And I have lots of holdover habits. But I, again, had good guidance from a fellow integral coach who just said, what would softly evolving ambition look like for you? And I really only have that question. I'm starting to find a different rhythm that's much more about what's needed to support the presence and the sort of beingness that I need to bring, rather than the checklist and the productivity quotient. The stuff all needs to happen, right? I'm talking to you, there's a lot on my work and personal plate right now. But literally, after the big work at the meeting, I got up intending to be productive and then meeting with you, and I ended up napping for an hour, which was exactly what I needed to show up.
I love it.
In a grounded way.
Yeah.
Which my old self would be like, oh my God, that's terrible. Like, how could you? But it's what was required, right? And so there's a bit of a humility to really continue to be present. This is what this moment needs. And I regularly debate between two Greek words about time. So chronos is time as we count it, right? Time on the clock.
Yeah.
And kairos is right timing. So it's time for this now. Like, it's time to plant. It's time to harvest. So there's a feeling with kairos that I'm trying to shuck off all of the productivity and the inner monologue of self-worth that goes with that, towards this kairos of this is the work now.
Yeah. Softly evolving ambition. I think that's going to stick with me. That feels really profound, and I love that. So thank you for sharing that. What has you hopeful?
Oh, yeah, that's a timely question, because hope's hard for me. I don't do it well. When I see the space open for people to discover themselves more, to discover something possible that they thought wasn't, whether it's an individual in their movement or opening way at the community level, which was why I needed that level of engagement, not to be in deep depressions for the second administration.
Yeah.
Then there's hope. And so I commit myself to the processes I know to make that more likely to happen. But the hard bit in that is what evolves, what unfolds. I only have a role. I don't control it, because, like, coming to grips with the genuine complexity of how our reality works, I have to show up and do my part, but then that's it. Then what unfolds.
Yeah. What can I influence? I think that's where I stand as well, because to your point, it can feel very daunting. And that's part of the reason I asked that question, because I do think a lot of people don't feel much hope right now. And I know that if we search for it, we can find it. And that's always what I come back to. What can I influence? And
yeah,
if it's beyond the scope of that, it's try again tomorrow.
I think the biggest danger we have right now as a species is that in this might is right, which is in many parts of the globe. Where North America, we pay attention to what's happening here mostly, but is that there is places of autonomy and power and agency that are possible for us. I think there's a big lie that any person who tries the might is right, they want to revoke other people's power so it's easier for them.
Yeah.
And so I do look personally for, that's why I stepped into the president's role at the community organization. That's a place I can influence. It's hyper-local, and I did it. I'll continue with a different sort of engagement, is to make sure you keep stepping into the places that you can exercise your power.
Yep, absolutely. Cheryl, thank you so much. This conversation has actually felt very grounding for me, so I appreciate that, and I thank you. Please tell folks listening how they can connect with you and learn more about your work.
Yeah, our website is kindpower.ca, because I'm up here in the big Canada, is where you can find out about me, about the things I'm offering. I also have a YouTube channel under Peace and Power, so you can find that there.
Thanks for spending some time with me today. Choosing to step off autopilot and think differently about your life takes work, and I don't take it lightly that you're here. If today's episode resonated, the best way to support the show is to share it with someone who might need to hear it. And whenever you're ready to go deeper, whether through free worksheets, guided audio reflections, or one-on-one coaching, you can find everything over at thinkoutsideTheLines.com. Be well, and I'll catch you next time.